Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are breaking down a moment that reshaped expectations and rewrote assumptions. Crimea being retaken was not just another development in the conflict. It was a shift that forced the world to rethink what was possible and what comes next. For years, Crimea was treated as fixed reality. Analysts spoke about it as permanent, untouchable, and beyond reversal. That belief shaped strategies, diplomacy, and public opinion across the globe. When that certainty collapsed, it sent shockwaves far beyond the battlefield. The change was not only territorial, it was psychological, strategic, and deeply symbolic. Ukraine's approach to Crimea was never impulsive. It was patient and deliberate. Instead of chasing headlines, the focus remained on preparation, pressure, and timing. Every move leading up to this moment appeared small on its own. Together, they formed a pattern that gradually weakened long-standing control. This is why the outcome surprised so many observers. The retaking of Crimea challenged the idea that time always favors the occupier. In this case, time became an advantage for the side willing to adapt, learn, and wait. One of the most important impacts was morale. For Ukraine, this moment reinforced belief. It proved that long-term goals were not just symbolic promises but achievable outcomes. That belief spread quickly. Soldiers, civilians, and leadership alike began operating with renewed confidence. Confidence changes how decisions are made. For the opposing side, the effect was the opposite. Crimea had been presented as a pillar of strength. When that pillar cracked, uncertainty followed. Uncertainty is dangerous in conflict. It slows responses, creates hesitation, and forces leaders to question assumptions that once felt secure. From a military perspective, Crimea mattered because of its location. Control over the peninsula affects access, movement, and regional balance in ways that extend far beyond its borders. The Black Sea dynamic shifted immediately. Naval planning, supply calculations, and regional security assessments had to be reconsidered almost overnight. This change did not happen because of one dramatic strike. It happened because systems were stressed from multiple directions at once. Logistics, communication, and coordination were all tested. When those systems weaken, even strong positions become vulnerable. Another key factor was information. Ukraine managed both action and narrative. Clear messaging prevented confusion and strengthened trust at home and abroad. The world was watching closely. Many governments had quietly doubted that Crimea could ever change hands again. Those doubts were suddenly outdated. Support that once came with caution began to carry new confidence. The success demonstrated that strategy and persistence could deliver results. This did not mean the conflict was over, but it did mean the direction had shifted. Planning now began from a different starting point. The retaking of Crimea also reshaped diplomatic conversations. What once sounded unrealistic began to sound possible. Leverage changed. Negotiations, pressure, and future frameworks all had to account for a new reality on the ground. Reality always shapes diplomacy more than rhetoric. Economically, the impact was significant. Crimea's status affected trade routes, sanctions, and long-term investment planning across the region. For Ukraine, this opened doors that had long been closed. Reconstruction and reintegration moved from distant ideas to active discussion. For civilians connected to Crimea, the moment carried emotional weight. Families separated by years of uncertainty felt a sense of possibility return. The humanitarian dimension cannot be ignored. Stability is not just about borders. It is about daily life, security, and the ability to plan for tomorrow. The retaking of Crimea also offered lessons about modern conflict. Large-scale wars are no longer decided by numbers alone. Adaptability, intelligence, and coordination now play central roles. Ukraine demonstrated how these elements can work together over time. This moment also challenged assumptions about deterrence. It showed that long-held positions are not immune to sustained pressure. The idea that certain outcomes are frozen forever proved false. History reminded everyone that change is always possible. Media narratives shifted quickly. Stories that once focused on endurance began focusing on transformation and momentum. The psychological effect reached beyond the region. Other nations watched closely, drawing lessons about sovereignty and resilience. The message was clear. Persistence backed by legitimacy can alter even the most entrenched situations. For Ukraine, the victory strengthened national identity. It reinforced a sense of ownership over the future rather than fear of the past. Younger generations saw proof that long struggles can produce results. That belief shapes how societies move forward. This moment also forced military analysts to rethink doctrine. Traditional models struggled to explain what had just happened. The operation highlighted the power of learning organizations. Ukraine adapted faster, adjusted smarter, and applied lessons in real time. Speed of decision-making mattered. Flexible command structures allowed quicker responses and fewer missed opportunities. Coordination between different elements proved decisive. Military action, intelligence, diplomacy, and public communication moved in sync. Another important factor was restraint. Instead of seeking dramatic escalation, Ukraine focused on sustainable progress. That restraint reduced unnecessary losses and preserved strength for long-term goals. It was a strategic choice, not a limitation. The opposing side faced difficult questions. When symbols fall, narratives weaken. When narratives weaken, pressure grows internally. Crimea had been more than territory, it had been a story. Losing control challenged that story directly. Economic pressure intensified. Political calculations became more complex. Maintaining control elsewhere now required more effort. Internationally, the shift influenced alliance dynamics. Partners reassessed their strategies based on demonstrated capability. Trust grew where results were visible. Support is always stronger when it aligns with success. The retaking of Crimea also emphasized the importance of patience. Quick wins often fade. Strategic wins reshape futures. This patience frustrated critics early on. In hindsight, it proved essential. The moment will likely be studied for years, not because it was dramatic, but because it was effective. It showed how pressure applied intelligently over time can outperform force applied recklessly. The human cost of the conflict remains real. No victory erases loss, but moments like this give meaning to sacrifice. They provide direction and purpose when fatigue sets in. Crimea's change in status altered planning across the region. Security assumptions, military postures, and political strategies all shifted. This was not an ending. It was a turning point. A turning point redefines what comes next. It changes the questions being asked. Instead of asking whether change is possible, the question became how far change could go. Ukraine now operates from a position of increased confidence. Confidence shapes risk assessment. Risks that once seemed unthinkable became calculated options. Fear no longer dominated every decision. The world learned that modern conflict rewards adaptability over rigidity. It rewards learning over repetition. It rewards legitimacy over imposed control. Crimea's retaking reminded everyone that history is not static. It moves when pressure meets opportunity. This moment did not arrive suddenly. It was built over years of effort, restraint, and belief. Belief matters. Without it, strategy collapses with it. Even distant goals become reachable. As time passes, this event will be seen as more than a regional shift. It will be remembered as the moment expectations broke and new paths opened. Crimea retaken changed everything because it changed how people think. It changed what leaders plan for. It changed what societies believe, and it changed what the future now allows. That is why this moment matters, not just for Ukraine, but for how the world understands power, persistence, and the possibility of change.